commissioned this altarpiece to be created to help in the healing process of the plague victims. So basically, what happened was, once this painting was finished, once it was installed in the church, the Antonites, this religious order, they would have these plague victims come and sit in front of this painting and eat bread and drink herb-infused wine as a way of healing, as a way of sitting and contemplating the Lord, who is, in the picture you can see, suffering from the same plague. So it's this plague where the skin is disfigured, there's this gangrene, there's these sores. It was kind of this horrible plague that was happening at the time. So Christ is represented suffering from the same plague as these people. And so there's this deep healing that was happening through the relationship between the people sitting in front of this painting, the plague victims, and the painting itself. And so I love this image, I love this story of the church turning to beauty as a way of healing, as a way of responding to this crisis of the plague of that time. The plague of today, I would posit, is that the culture is tending away from shared lived experiences of beauty, very much like this Eisenheim altarpiece kind of experience. I think that the culture is tending towards distraction and escapism and isolation. I'll just try to speak loud. So I think that this plague of the culture today that's happening really stems from this isolation.
I'm going to see if the other microphone is better.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll just continue. I don't know, can people hear me in the back or no? Okay. Cool. So again, it's cool. Sorry. So I think that there's this deep inner longing, this hunger that the soul is experiencing today in our culture. I think that there's, again, this sort of deeper plague that's happening that's creating a disintegration of the human person and the human heart. And we've seen this throughout all of human history because of the fall, because of original sin. We know this. We know this experience. However, today, I think it's taken the form of this disconnect between man and reality, where man is being stripped away from his relationship to himself and to others and to God. So with this being the plague of today, what I would posit, how do we get back to a place of integration? How do we reorient towards the relationship that we're made for, which is ultimately a relationship with God in eternity? Earlier this week, in the Liturgy of the Hours, the prayer of the church, one of the intercessions was as follows: inspire all teachers and artists to prepare mankind for your kingdom. Inspire all teachers and artists to prepare mankind for your kingdom. I love this. I love that this was a part of the Liturgy of the Hours this week, this prayer of the church. So I would posit that the solution to this plague of our time is artists inspired by God, guiding us towards integration with ourselves, with others, and ultimately back into relationship with God. But why artists? Why does the church ask artists to guide the way in this, to prepare mankind for the kingdom? I think it's because of the artist's heart. There's something very unique and special about the artist's heart and the way that God created us. First off, artists mediate between God and man. There's this prophetic nature, this instrumental sort of nature that the vocation of the artist holds. There's a responsibility with that, and I think artists in their work are revealing to us not only the way that God is gazing at us, like for example in an icon of Christ, when we look at that icon, we're not only seeing the way that God is gazing at us, but we're seeing the way that this artist has contemplated God and is giving back that gaze through his gaze. So we learn a lot from the sensitivity of the artist's gaze, the way that he is contemplating the Lord, then transmits to us the way that we are being received by the Lord. And so thinking about that, thinking about this voice of the artist that comes through this artwork, think about how important the artist's gaze is, how crucial it is. Pope Benedict XVI tells us that authentic beauty unlocks the yearning of the human heart, the profound desire to know, to love, to go towards the other, to reach for the beyond. If we acknowledge that beauty touches us intimately, that it wounds us, that it opens our eyes, then we rediscover the joy of seeing, of being able to grasp the profound meaning of our existence, the mystery of which we are a part. So again, holding that, what Pope Benedict XVI's words, we know that the function of the artist's gaze is crucial, it's essential. Art has this capacity to lead us to discoveries and revelations about ourselves and about others, and ultimately about God. I want to think more specifically about artists who are living their Catholic faith, artists who are receiving the Eucharist every day, who are consuming the Eucharist and gazing at the Eucharist in adoration. That there's something about this particular artist's gaze that impacts the artwork that he's making, this lens that then we're receiving from. And I think this is really important in this conversation about the artist's gaze and about the way that we're receiving and then we're being transformed. We're being restored through the way that this artist is looking at the Eucharist and then sharing their work with the world. Artists set a tone and we create an atmosphere. Sometimes an atmosphere for a whole city, definitely for a whole culture. And I guess I want to demonstrate this by asking everyone to think about the last time you were walking around New York. Maybe you were downtown or somewhere where you enjoy walking around. It's just a beautiful part of town. And you feel surrounded by beautiful buildings. And the ornamentation, maybe the way that the buildings are created, maybe the art outside of the buildings, whatever it is, it lifts you up. Your body, you feel it in your body. Like you're being accompanied by this beautiful building. It almost kind of gives you a sense of reverence, like the architect has this reverence for you, the beholder of this building. It kind of gives us that uplifting. But think about then the way that you feel when you're walking past buildings that have the opposite effect on you. Maybe this is something very minimal or rigid, kind of stone-like prison feeling. A lot of kind of post-World War II communist architecture makes me think of this. There's something about that experience that sort of diminishes our souls. It diminishes the way that we feel as we're walking past it. We don't feel accompanied, we don't feel uplifted. And you just know it if you've experienced it, and I'm sure we all have. There's that difference in the way that we feel amidst beautiful buildings and buildings that are a little bit more soul-sucking. And so again, just highlighting, artists create an atmosphere and we set the tone in the world with a lot of these things. So looking at, again, this plague of our time, so this kind of isolation experienced by many of us, I would say this is through a lot of advancements in technology, which, while they're not evil in themselves, do hold a lot of this capacity for taking us away from each other, taking away from this kind of integration of ourselves in relationship with God. Things like AI or virtual reality, TikTok, Instagram. These are all kind of eerie Twilight Zone-y technological advancements that I think are tearing us apart interiorly and as a community. So that's why the mission of Arthouse2B, while it may have been born out of the experience of the pandemic lockdowns in 2020, has continued. even after the threat of lockdowns has ended. Artists have this essential role of putting people back into contact with reality, with incarnational reality. And that draws us deeper into relationship with ourselves, with others, and with God. However, artists, by nature of being submerged in this culture, also suffer deeply from this plague that's happening in the culture. And so even though it takes inspired, filled, restored artists in order to approach this plague of the culture, we are all in turn suffering from it. So how do we address this need? This plague that's faced by our culture and artists? In considering this question, someone that I look towards is Dorothy Day. She's been quite an inspiration in my life, and I'm sure most people in this room are somewhat familiar with her story and the impact that her houses of hospitality and the worker movement, the Catholic worker movement, have just impacted the lives of so many in New York and beyond. So Dorothy Day, when she was 8 years old, she was in her family's home in San Francisco when a huge earthquake came. And she's in her room alone on a big brass bed, and it was moving back and forth. And she felt in this moment the deepest sense of loneliness and fear before God that she had ever felt before. And so afterwards, after this earthquake, after she had felt this deep loneliness, she recalls walking outside of the door of her home and seeing people coming over from Oakland, coming to help the people who had just suffered this earthquake in San Francisco. People who were giving clothing, food, helping build tents and shelters. People are just helping each other. And she has this quote. She says, "While the crisis lasted, people loved each other. It was as though they were united in Christian solidarity. It makes one think of how people could, if they would, care for each other in times of stress, ungrudgingly, in pity and love." So here's this moment where all of a sudden she feels the loneliness and the fear drawn out of her that she has just experienced from the earthquake, based off of this experience of seeing then people helping each other, this authentic experience of gospel Christian charity and solidarity. Later in life, Dorothy Day is known for this quote, where she reflects on all of her work, all of the experience with the Catholic worker movement. She says, "We have all known the long loneliness, and we have learned that the solution is love, and that love comes with community." Both of these things, the story of Dorothy Day from the beginning of her life, and this quote addressing this deep need, this long loneliness that all people have, that is addressed through love and through community. All of this has deeply resounded with me at different points of Arthouse2B's growth. And I think that, especially in my own experience, just as an artist grappling with these things, it rings true. It resounds very deeply. So here's where the beginning of Arthouse comes in. In the summer of 2020, if you were here in New York, you know how weird it was. That's all. I mean, yeah, it was so strange being here during the height of the pandemic. And there was this isolation felt by so many of us, but especially amongst the artist community, I would say. Anyone who was accustomed to showing their work, to being able to put their work in front of audiences and perform and live out their vocation fully as an artist, was suffering very deeply in other types of ways. And so this is where Arthouse2B comes in. July 2020, I was meeting up to catch up with a friend, Father McAtee, who is a Franciscan friar of the renewal here in the city. And in this conversation I was having with him, he asked if I thought that artists could be uplifted at the time, since everyone had kind of still been struggling with this experience of galleries, museums, concert halls, everything being shut down, and masses were just starting back up. We were all feeling like so dry, so empty. And so he asked me, do you think we should do something for artists? And I said, yeah, let's do it. What should we do? And he said, maybe we should do a mass. Let's do a specific mass that's for artists. And then afterwards do a little gallery show, performances, and just hang out. Like just get people together. So this was the first event that we hosted. And in putting on this event, I asked a friend who I was living with at the time, Claire Kretschmar, if she would help me host it and organize it. We were living in apartment 2B. And so this is where the 2B of Arthouse comes in. So we kind of started with this very small sort of community of Father Malachi, myself, Claire, and then the pastor of Annunciation Church, sort of coming together around this idea that we need to do something in response to this issue that artists are facing, and expanded into this first event where we had about 30, maybe 35 people total. Most of them were the artists themselves who were showing their work or performing after the Mass. And we just created this beautiful little kind of community event. It's very intimate, and after that we realized this needs to keep happening. We can't just let this end at this first event, because especially with a lot of people coming up and sharing with us, like, wow, I can't believe, this is the first time I've seen people since the pandemic, essentially, and got to share my work and how meaningful it was. We just realized there's such a need for this. Let's keep going. So later, after that first event, a few months went by. We hosted a couple of other small events, and we were starting to plan a film screening for a few of our friends who created short films that wanted to show them to people and just do a 2-night event to do that. So it was in planning this event that I realized that addressing the needs of the heart of the artist was worth any risk that would be thrown at us. Because around this time, New York had enacted a law that you couldn't have more than 10 people in a room at a time. And so that was a big obstacle. That was something that created a lot of kind of attention, something that I had to reckon with in a way that we hadn't before. And so I remember talking to a friend about it at the time and asking, what should we do? I don't want to get in trouble, but I also feel like this is really needed. Just being able to have people get together in this way and see that these guys' films. Like, I was so kind of stressed out and tension about this. And this friend of mine said to me, this might be your Dorothy Day moment where, consider Dorothy Day, who had to discern in her own heart if God was asking her to potentially be arrested, get in trouble for participating in certain political protests, for living out this mission that she felt God had placed on her heart. So this friend just challenged me, like, maybe you need to pray and ask God what he thinks, instead of being in your head about it and being worried about what the rest of the world thinks. And so I'm so grateful that friend said that, because I did take it to prayer and discerned that very deeply at the time and realized, yeah, I think that God wants this to happen. I don't think this is the time to cower in fear. And so despite the risks that this might hold, I think it's still worth it to go forward with this event. And so we did. And that was a very pivotal kind of moment for Arthouse2B. So all that to say, all that to demonstrate that in realizing that this mission and that the heart of the artist was worth this risk, and also knowing what the artist's heart is up against in the culture, it became clear that ultimately restoration is needed. Restoration is an interesting word. I feel like I hear restoration thrown around a lot these days, especially just in Christian circles, and for a long time I sort of wondered, well, what does that actually mean? Like, how are we actually addressing restoration? What is that? So I was doing a little bit of research and found one of the Hebrew words for restoration is Rapha. I love kind of digging into words and their meanings. I think there's a lot of symbolism that can be drawn out from that. And so this word, Rapha, in Hebrew, has multiple meanings: to cure, to heal, restore, repair, forgive, or to render whole. So this can refer to both spiritual and physical healing. And this also comes up in the Bible at different times when God identifies himself as a healer. And so the title for this is Jehovah Rapha, which just literally means God is our healer. We see this in Exodus 15 when God purifies the waters that the Israelites are drinking out of that's making them sick. And he says directly, I am the Lord who heals you. And so we know he claims this identity, that he's our healer. So this word Rapha, I love this image. So where it comes from is from this Middle Eastern weaving practice. So if a garment is torn and needs to be repaired, these weavers will string up the garment on a pole, and they'll hang rocks from the bottoms of the threads of the garment. And then they'll start to string one by one, taking out the old thread and putting in a new thread in its place. And they keep that going until the whole piece of fabric, till the whole garment is repaired. And amidst that, there's a stick that's kind of going down like a loom that's stretching out the fabric. So there's a rhythm of the old is being replaced by the new and stretched down by the stick. So there's like a stretching and a rhythm, the old being replaced by the new. And the reason why this phrase, this word Rapha came to be is because the rocks at the bottoms of the threads that are hanging are hitting each other while this process is happening. And it sounds like Rapha, Rapha, which is really interesting. But I love this. It's like such a clear visual image of God's inner workings in the heart of man when he is open, even just a crack. When man's heart is open after brokenness, after duress, after sin, after darkness, God coming in and weaving in that restoration, repairing the heart of man. I think, we're the garment that's in need of new threads constantly. And we're not to be thrown out. We're not to be traded in for a new garment or something like that. But we are to be repaired and restored to the wholeness that God created each of us to radiate to the world, to be restored to that original image and likeness of God. So this quote from Dorothy Day comes back to mind again. We've all known the long loneliness, and that we've learned that the only solution is love, and that love comes with community. Love that comes with community. This is at the heart of our approach to this idea of restoration in Arthouse2B. And this takes shape in the form of eating together, praying together, going to art events together, sometimes making art together. Sometimes it's drinking Father Joseph Michael's Arthouse ales. Sometimes it's just going out to see shows, to see museums, operas, ballets, to have a shared experience of art together somewhere in the city, or just having simple movie nights at each other's homes. So the emphasis in restoration here is on forming friendships. This is through sometimes small intimate gatherings or sometimes larger events, like the weekend-long artist retreat that we host once a year, or through a Mass for Artists, something like that. But ultimately, at the heart of all of that, the organizing principle is Jesus Christ. Prayer is at the center of everything, and we recognize that there's no deeper unity than that which comes from God and our union with Him. So the fruit of this, I would say, has been sort of an organic growth within Arthouse that I've seen over the past few years since we began. And I want to talk about a specific type of event, a specific event that we held last year that demonstrates this sort of deeper community that is formed out of these expressions of love that brings forth restoration. So about a year ago, we held an event called Behold This Heart. And this was an event that was inspired by an image of the Immaculate Heart that I had painted years ago, that then two friends of mine separately created poetry and spoken word based off of contemplating this image. It was really amazing kind of how the Holy Spirit worked with that. And so realizing that, we decided to create our own new event and to invite people into it, to create an event that would be sort of an immersive experience of Mary's heart. So this is how Behold This Heart came about. But sort of the template of this event is a good example of a lot of Arthouse2B events that we host. It began with Mass in the church, and then everyone filters into the gallery space that's attached to the church. And as you enter, you're surrounded by artwork, surrounded by, in this instance, these fabric paintings that I created of Mary's heart. And then people are seated, they're kind of putting themselves in a place to receive the artwork. And then these two friends, Father Sam and Sister Jordan, they shared performances of their poetry and of music that sort of washed over everyone in the crowd. And so it was kind of this combination of prayer and art and performance that took place during this event. Then afterwards, everyone was encouraged to stay and hang out, have a drink, talk, grab a bite, process what they just saw, and just sort of take it easy. But to be in this community experience and share with each other afterwards. And so this is sort of standard fare for one of our events. So within this event, there's an even more kind of specific story that I want to highlight that I think gets to kind of a deeper tenet within all of this. And so this story relates to, this is a young man who came to the event, who emailed me the day after the first night. He was going through a very dark period in his life. He had just recently found out that he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then he had a cancerous mass above his heart that was blocking the pulmonary flow of blood from the heart to the lungs in part, like kind of that cycle that happens. And so through that, was experiencing depression and just a very dark time. And so he came to the event completely by chance, because that day he had been kind of having a breakdown and called a friend. The friend said he was going to Behold This Heart and invited him to come. So what followed after this young man experienced the event and what he shared with me, I want to read it out loud. It's from an email that he wrote that I have permission to share. He said, "It was a very moving and healing experience that brought gentle, rolling tears upon my face. It felt as though the Blessed Mother herself was there among us. An image filled my mind of the Blessed Mother slowly taking daggers of sorrow from my own heart, and her receiving with her gentle and already bloodied hands. It's as if she was receiving my pain and intimately uniting it with her sorrowful heart. This image is ingrained within my heart. I just genuinely wanted to say thank you. I needed this healing. I needed to know my mom isn't going to leave me through all this suffering." Gosh, yeah, receiving that email for me was such an affirmation of these tenets that we built Arthouse on. And it was just, I was so, honestly, just so humbled and praise God for this healing that this young man's experienced. I recently spoke with him, and he's been having kind of a complete, beautiful conversion over the past year, and now is actually in remission from his cancer, so praise God. But yeah, again, love that comes with community. This is the framework for restoration. I really believe that. But what comes first is the experience of love, and the community and restoration of hearts as a result. So within this kind of framework of Arthouse2B, something that we've learned, something we've sort of delineated over the past few years, is that this love that brings forth the community is generated through three core values. This is artistic integrity, deepening spirituality, and nourishing hospitality. So I'll just kind of briefly go through those. Artistic integrity. So this is the generosity that flows from the artist who is giving fully of themselves to create artwork that then will be shared with the world, will be shared with individuals and communities. So with Arthouse, we're really trying to encourage artists to live out their artistic vocations in the creation of their work, and then giving space to show their work. We've done this through hosting plays, film fests, poetry readings, dance performances, music, kind of anything you can think of. We've probably done it, and we're open to doing more. There's always new ideas kind of being brought forth. So artistic integrity, deepening spirituality. So this is the love that is born out of encounters with God through prayer, the sacraments, and the moral life. So we realize that as artists, we carry the treasure that we hold within our artistic gifts in earthen vessels. We know that we need to purify the interior of our cups. Artistic inspiration and sharing in God's creativity is a spiritual process. And so we want that process to be unencumbered. So just as we're training ourselves in our artistic techniques, we need to be able to train ourselves spiritually and to be encouraged by others who are also on this journey in order to convey truth, beauty, and goodness through our gifts. So that's deepening spirituality. Finally, nourishing hospitality. And this value I'm going to emphasize and share a little bit more about. I want to flesh it out. So this is the love that comes from the experience of friendship and belonging, especially focusing on hospitality of heart and creating a spiritual atmosphere through our tone, preparation, and prayer ahead of time that goes into our events or any encounter with someone that we're speaking with or meeting with. So here I want to really highlight, underline this point. Hospitality is an invitation to friendship. Hospitality is not just a program, and it's not about the food we serve or the candles we put out or how beautiful something is set up. That's all part of it, and that those things are huge as well. But primarily, hospitality is an invitation to friendship. That's sort of the lifeblood of hospitality. And I think that there's something beautiful that happens when someone knows that they're being received and they know that they belong. It's so basic, it's so simple, but often so overlooked. Then that gift of being received starts to turn into, I am capable of receiving another person in turn. So there's this beautiful cycle of, I know that I'm received, and so I can go and do that with someone else. I can receive someone else. And I think that that's brought forth in this kind of spirit of hospitality of heart and with that invitation to friendship. And I've seen this happen in the past few years of Arthouse's growth, especially in the deeper community life that has formed organically. So for example, people that are coming to our events that start to make connections, make deeper friendships, and then start hosting their own events, or start inviting people to go see shows with them, or have dinners at their home, or do play readings at their apartment. I'm looking at you. And it's so beautiful to see this, this rich kind of deeper community, and to see this have this chain reaction and expand. That it's not just within this little exclusive group, that this is really a welcoming kind of expansive group that's open to the creativity of the Holy Spirit. So kind of coming back to my own story within all of this, as I was writing this talk, I was really reflecting on sort of where in the core of my own story do I find some of these things? Why has Arthouse2B sort of been impacted by my own life? Where's my story in this? And I traced everything back to this kind of experience growing up in an atmosphere of spirituality, artistry, and hospitality at my home parish in Lafayette, Indiana. There was a woman who worked as a youth minister at my home parish when I was growing up, but she wore many other hats, as a lot of youth ministers do, I think. Her name was Gwen. And she was a big inspiration for me, looking back now, on why Arthouse2B even exists. And these things that I've highlighted in this talk today, and kind of the vision and the mission of Arthouse2B, I think I can trace back a lot of it to this woman. So this woman, she would host plays, she would write plays, and then enlist people from the parish, including us kids, to act in these plays. She would host this young girls group every Saturday morning, and we learned how to garden, we went on hikes, we learned how to bake bread, we learned how to do calligraphy, embroider, we learned how to pray. And outside of that, I mean, there were these canoe trips we would take. I feel like this woman really poured herself into the deep life of the parish community that I grew up in order to make it a holistic, beautiful experience centered in the life of the church. So with that, I feel like there's something there. There's something there that has been put on my heart through her encouragement, and also through, of course, these other experiences and people looking up to, like Dorothy Day, that have really formed my own heart, that then have transmitted themselves into the work of Arthouse2B. So I would say that with all of this, and this kind of impact that I've witnessed in my life and the community here, that the largest thing within this mission of restoration of the heart of the artist and the culture is related to hospitality. It's related to that encounter, which again is more than just an event or a program, but an invitation. An invitation to be, to just simply be, to hang out, to look to the simplicity of love that is the solution to our long loneliness, and to encounter beautiful things, to be able to experience lived, beautiful, good art that's right here in your community. All of these things put people over the project, and it creates an invitation to a place where hearts can rest, in a culture that is surrounded by restless hearts and prioritizes maximum productivity and efficiency. So that kind of people over the project mentality and the place where hearts can rest. That's sort of the hope of Arthouse2B, and I think something that I've seen already happen. So with all of this, I'm going to start to land the plane now with this talk. I don't know what my timing has been, but but within this mission of Arthouse2B, we just would love to welcome all of you into this mission as well. Maybe you've already been to one of our events and you've experienced what I'm talking about for yourself, maybe not. But if you'd like to be involved or learn how you can support the work that we're doing, please come up and talk to me after, and I'd be happy to share more and get to know your story too. Thank you so much. God bless you.
For some questions, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. If you can raise your hand, then we'll call you.
What's Arthouse2B's next event?
Oh, great question, Thomas. Our next event is a Mass for Artists with Cardinal Dolan. It's exciting. Next Saturday, March 9th at 5 o'clock. And there's stuff about it in the back. There's flyers.
Will it be here?
No, it'll be at an Annunciation Church in West Harlem. Yeah.
When you made the decision to host the event during COVID, do you feel like it was really guided by God, or did you get a lot of pushback during it, or did the event go great, after you made that decision to have it?
Yeah. So this question, did it feel like the decision to continue hosting events during COVID, was that guided by God, and were there obstacles to that? I think, it's really interesting. I think we didn't really receive a ton of pushback. At least, I think it was always worse in my head, like what might happen, but then we'd get to the event, and then nothing would really, I think people just knew if they were coming that there might be a risk, but that everyone was willing to kind of put that aside, knowing that the deeper kind of sense of community, gathering around artists, seeing beautiful things, like kind of developing that was more important. People kind of just made their own discernment with that, and so we respected that and just still hosted things. But yeah, definitely felt, as I mentioned in that story, like it felt clear that the Lord was at the helm of all of this, and so with that, I felt a lot of freedom. I think all of us hosting the events felt that freedom, despite the fear and kind of weirdness of that time.
Have you had to navigate any imposter syndrome as, man, I can't follow my faith with this creative calling, or I can't follow my creative calling and stay true to my faith, and how can I be an artist and a Catholic?
Interesting. Good. So imposter syndrome, I really hate that phrase so much, because people say it all the time, like, oh, I have imposter syndrome, I can't do this, and I think we need to just get rid of that phrase altogether. Growth mindset. But really, I think there have
tension then maybe.
Yeah, like the tension of being an artist of faith and trying to kind of
Unify
those two things. There's a lot of tension in that, for sure. I think for me, the biggest reckoning with that happened in college, in my undergraduate experience, when I knew, I just had in my heart that I wanted to create art that would glorify God and that would evangelize. And I just was very zealous about that. And so a lot of my artwork in undergrad was clunky and kind of overly saccharine, religious imagery at first, because I was thinking in order to be a Catholic and an artist, I have to make art that's overtly things that I've seen in churches or icons or something. And so then, thankfully I had a few teachers who were encouraging of both my faith and my art and weren't diminishing it. And so they pointed me to artists from throughout art history like Giotto and Fra Angelico and George Rouault, all of these artists who were faith-filled and devout Catholics in different capacities, but that were following the inner voice that God had given them as a unique artist. And so their work was kind of coming out of that sort of voice rather than looking like every other piece of artwork that was happening at the time or up to that point within Catholic history and iconography. So that was huge for me. I think within that experience in college, I learned not only does my art need to come from this deep interior kind of cultivated authentic space where God is speaking to me, Erin McAtee, right now. And so that means my imagery looks different than a lot of work that's come before. But I also learned that this is part of our spiritual journey too, even if I wasn't an artist. There's some point that I think it's helpful to have this reckoning as Christians, to realize that my spiritual life and my journey might not look like everyone else's exactly to a T. And that's okay, God created us all unique and also in his image, so. Yeah, I probably answered way more than what you wanted there, but but great question. Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this, but basically, my understanding is that part of Arthouse is 2B's mission is the restoration of culture, and so how do you see? My understanding is that Arthouse wants to help come to a restoration of the culture at large, because that is a huge mission, and it sounds like you want to do it on a very hospitality and very focusing on friendships. Is that correct? And then, if so, is there anything else that you see in terms of the restoration of culture? And are you thinking, is Arthouse to be focusing on restoration of Catholic culture or the restoration of like the oral culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, I think these three sort of core values that I highlighted that we have, the artistic integrity, deepening spirituality, and nourishing hospitality, they're all, at least up to this point, seem like very essential values at the core of an organization that's trying to restore culture as a whole. So not just Catholic culture, but a larger culture, so to speak, that is broken, that's hurting from X, Y, and Z, like you name it, from the things mentioned, like that are creating that kind of isolation and disintegration in the heart of man today, which is so many things, but especially the things that are creating the isolation, like our kind of dependence on technology, dependence on scrolling through, kind of seeing things quickly, like what that does to our psychology, I think is impacting a lot of the larger culture, but it starts in here. It starts with the individual kind of scale that's experiencing those things, and that might be kind of secluding themselves as a result of it. And so I think with that, that's why there's this answer, I think, that, as Dorothy Day says, this solution is love and community, right? That hospitality, especially when lived out of a place of love and out of a place of deep encounter and an invitation to friendship, that sort of addresses that disintegration of man that I see happening today, this like plague of today. So I would say that's sort of a larger part of addressing the renewal and the restoration of culture, but that it starts on a very like individual, small scale, just in that like charity that we give and receive.
You mentioned the needs of the heart of the artist, and that phrase makes sense to me, but could you say more about what you mean there, what you think those are?
Yeah, so the needs of the heart of the artist. Well, I think it's very similar to what I shared just a bit ago. I think artists are also suffering from everything everyone else is suffering from in the culture, so a lot of it is that. I think that the need, especially in hearts of artists, it seems like there is a sensitivity that artists have that's very deep. I don't know how to explain it, but I think everyone has different levels of sensitivity, but for some reason God has allowed the artist to have this like very deep sensitivity and this capacity to receive and to see things with very open eyes, and to then like take that in and then transmit it into something else that's like reflected back to the world. And so I think with that sensitivity, sometimes that can get twisted, sometimes it can become oversensitivity to you name whatever vice or sin that is happening in the culture. Like think of, I don't know if you've ever been to a gallery or seen artwork that's just, you know that it's perverse. Like you see it and you know this is like perverse and is twisted, and maybe it's an image of the human body that's disfigured or that's overly like explicit in nature. We know that does something to our hearts, and so I think with artists in an even deeper way, we see images, we take in everything around us, in such a sensitive way that then it creates almost like a, we have these like filters that then are kind of cracking and chipping away bit by bit at these like vessels that we have, like these earthen vessels. So that's what I would say. I could probably go on about that and think of like a lot of other needs that artists have other than that. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that comes to mind right now. Yeah.
Hello. Sorry for my English. I'm still learning. I know American. I'm Peruvian.
Cool.
I'm here for tourists. I have two questions. The first one is, in my country, the majority religion is Catholic, but the majority of people, they say they're Catholic, but they are not practicing. In your art experience, what tips you can do for people like me, like do more evangelization for people like don't know, say they are Catholics, but they don't know what is about Catholic or what is about the real Christianity. The other question is, in your artist experience, what is the best way to make art for people don't believe in God or don't care about the religions?
Wow, yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I think with this question of evangelization, I think it just starts with looking at the people around you. I think it just kind of comes from seeing like who's in my local community and what are their needs. It might not be the same as the needs of artists in New York City, but there might be a deeper need there for just, I think we can still take away this friendship and this kind of sense of hospitality that restores. So maybe it looks like hosting a dinner and just getting to know people more deeply where you live. So I think sometimes evangelization can have this, sometimes we put a pressure on ourselves to, like, what am I going to say to this person to help them convert? Because I know that, like, I want them to go to heaven and I just want to have the right words to say. And sometimes it's really just thinking about, like, well, what does this person, like, really, what do they need first? It might be love. It might be someone to ask them to hang out or to just, like, say a kind word to them and make, like, eye contact with them. Because unfortunately, like so many people in society have these, like, I think, wounds that we carry from not being looked at enough in a pure gaze by other people. And so even that can be such a huge gift to someone. But so in terms of that question, I think it's just starting with kind of examining, like, what are the needs of the people in front of me and how can I simply address that? In terms of this question about art, how does one think about creating art for audiences that might not believe in God? It's a great question. I love this quote from Flannery O'Connor. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she was a fiction writer. She was Catholic. She was writing in the South in America during a time, I mean, I think still it's a little tough to be a Catholic in parts of the South. It's very Protestant heavy. And so she has this quote, I don't remember it exactly, but she says, when she's writing, she's not really writing for Catholics, but she's really writing for people who are atheists, who don't believe in God, or who have like thrown God completely out of their existence. That's really who she's conscious of when she's writing. It's not Catholics. Which is really interesting because Catholics love her writing. Like, I love her writing so much. It's beautiful. I see the workings of God within these fiction stories that she crafts. But it's just interesting to me that she has this reflection as like a Catholic writer, that she is actually very cognizant and writing for atheists, for people who aren't there. And so I think in a similar way, at least in my experience as an artist, as a painter, I try to think in that similar mindset of Flannery O'Connor. Like, yes, I realize that my artwork probably will address and kind of and reach a lot of Catholics in a deep way who understand what I'm putting out. But at the same time, I want to be cognizant of the people who are atheists, people who have no desire to have a relationship with God or don't really want any part of that. And so some of that's going into my work, but ultimately I think artists just need to be faithful to the authentic, to the original voice that's being kind of filtered through their artistic gaze and through their gifts that God is giving them. And so, and especially as Catholic artists, like I mentioned, it's so much of that is just living a sacramental life, praying, going to confession, going to daily mass, and like having good community that's helping us create that good art, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I was at your event down at St. Joseph's Church a number of months ago, which was really wonderful. I can't recommend it highly enough to everyone. And I just want, because you guys are a 501c3, 3B, whatever it is, like the thing, nonprofit thing, right? Yeah, it's like a thing, official government thingamajig, yeah. Like, so, like, you know, can you tell us about like your plans for like the structure of like 2B, of like who you have now, or like your plans, like we want to build like a theater and stuff, or you know what I mean, like and like long term, like whatever, long, like a 20-year plan, like a 5, you know what I mean, like we want to do some fundraising for, because I didn't even see like a donation box here tonight, you know what I mean? I was just like, and like, you know, renting these rooms costs money, you know, and I just, you know.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I didn't know, like long-term things, you know.
Totally. So here's what I'll say. So I don't know how much time we have. I could answer this question for a long time, but but ultimately, so right now, a lot of the team structure is a core team of myself, Claire, who's here, and James, who's also here, and also a circle of main volunteers who help along with hosting events, planning, and also addressing some of those kind of more intimate gatherings and being able to kind of cultivate that deeper community outside of the larger events. However, I think our long-term vision and one of our biggest hopes is to be able to have our own physical space someday that would be able to have a little theater and have dance studios and art studios and a chapel with the Blessed Sacrament and a gallery and rooms for artists to have residencies. And yeah, so I think like that's sort of a larger dream that deals with more of like a practical house structure of Arthouse2B. So, and of course, yes, you mentioned fundraising. We're very much in a fundraising season right now. So we've just kind of formally launched the nonprofit and are looking at how do we grow this in a financially sustainable way so that we can better support artists and be able to hopefully kind of create more of a staffing structure so that we can have more of an impact on the culture and on artists. And so, yeah, so please come talk to me after, anyone? But yeah, we have some little like QR codes in the back with donation widget that goes to our website as well. So that's kind of an easy way to find that. But does that answer your question? Like I said, I could talk to you all day about games for Arthouse2B, but maybe that's enough for now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's give we would like to thank Erin for coming to grace us with her witnessing and how to live an authentic life as a Catholic in New York City that points not just to true beauty, but the true God, and also to build community in a place where in loneliness and just being yourself is very difficult. So let's give Erin a big round of applause.